Welcome back. We have an amazing afternoon, so I'm really glad you are here. And one of the great pleasures in assuming this position is to build on the long-standing relationship that we have with the New Jersey Historical Commission. When I first came to New York in '75, I quickly got to know a number of people in the New Jersey Historical Commission. I got to meet Mr. Giles, Dr. Giles at that time. I first met Clem, but also a number of other people who worked there, and they have always done amazing work despite the horrendous cutbacks that began under Reagan. They have really kept going in ways that have constantly been documenting and paying emphasis on the stories, especially of those who had traditionally not been included in the history of the state. So that work is continuing. I really deeply appreciate it. And part of the annual event that the Price Institute is involved in is really the award of the Giles R. Wright Award. And, excuse me, Gesundheit. And this is, as you can imagine, a grant that's given by the New Jersey Historical Commission to the an outstanding project that addresses a topic in the field of African American history and designates it as under the name of Giles Wright, who used to work there, but also was, of course, so integral to organizing the MTW as well. This year, to present this year's award, please welcome back Dr. Larry Green, who, as you remember, is a professor at Seton Hall University and also a member, and oftentimes he's been a chair as well, of the New Jersey Historical Commission. So Larry Green, and if you could just welcome him, and then he's going to be making the award. Larry Green.
Good afternoon. We had a wonderful morning session, beautiful music and singing, and excellent presentations. So it was indeed a great morning. I'd like to present the Giles Wright Award, named after Giles Wright, who was the director of the African American History Program within the New Jersey Historical Commission. Our award winner for this year is for the exhibit Radical Women Fighting for Power and the Right to Vote. This is an exhibit at the Newark Public Library on the 3rd floor. Please take the opportunity to visit that excellent exhibit. As you know, this is the 100th year anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And it's very important to understand that the fight for women's suffrage and the 19th Amendment was indeed a multicultural affair, a multi-ethnic and multiracial affair. And when you see that exhibit, you will see African American suffragettes who were involved in this struggle for women's rights. And so I think it's most appropriate in 2020 that this award goes to the Newark Public Library and for the exhibit Radical Women Fighting for Power and the Right to Vote. I've been working at the Newark Public Library on microfilm, and I can attest to you that the Newark Public Library and the New Jersey Information Center there is a wonderful historical resource. And it gives me great pleasure to present this award to our recipients today. Noelle Lorraine Williams, the exhibit curator and researcher. Beth Zach Cohen, research assistant. And George Robb, research assistant and professor at William Patterson, couldn't be with us today, but he's been an integral part of the research staff. So I'd like to have our recipients make some remarks and briefly explain to you what this exhibit is about.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I have to attest, I see him often at the microfilm machine. He's a warrior. On behalf of the Newark Public Library, which works to serve the communities of Newark as well as the communities of New Jersey and many people throughout the country, I would like to say thank you to Rutgers University, Rutgers University and the Clement Price Institute for convening this event. It's amazing. I remember coming here and Dr. Price convening and making it a very warm environment so that we understand that the process of learning is something that all communities engage in. One does not need to have a degree or be a part of an institution to have a desire to learn. And of course, in African American culture, where we've been learning about people who were digging holes in the ground to teach each other how to read, to other people who were secretly learning how to read in the dark of night, we know this. So much respect to our ancestors, Dr. Clement Price and Dr. Marion Thompson, as well as Giles Wright. So many thanks to the New Jersey Historical Commission. We received 2 grants for this, the research for this exhibition, and it just shows or it demonstrates the understanding of what it takes to really bring diverse histories into the public eye. It's so easy, time and time again, for us to say, well, we couldn't find the immigrant women who were a part of this story. We couldn't find more about the working class women because they didn't leave documents in the archive. We couldn't learn more about the African American women because they didn't leave diaries in historical societies. But with the New Jersey Historical Commission's support, we were able to do the tracing and the scouring of the archive for almost 14 months to produce this exhibition. So thank you. Thank you to Marion Callie, Dr. Ingrid Bentecourt, the officers at the Newark Public Library. Thank you again to Dr. George Robb, who was our supervising scholar on this project, and to my colleague, Beth Zach Cohen from the New Jersey Information Room. Many of you know Beth in person. Some of you all have seen her at the New Jersey Room. She doesn't want to say anything today, and I'll respect that. She is an instrumental person in assisting all kinds of people with all kinds of questions. From where do I buy covers for my shoes in the rain, to can you tell me how many people were at this conference in 1918 and they didn't publish a booklet? That's commitment, and she does it with diligence and patience and democracy. Because even before I became a scholar, and I just emailed her out of the blue, she was as good then, she's good all the time with everyone, and that is what public service is about. I'm going to wrap up. I would like to again say thank you to Dr. Betty Livingston Adams. Even though we didn't work with her, her work on Black women, Christian organizers in Summit was instrumental to pushing us along on the work that we needed to do. To the Vineland Historical Society, which provided documents with ease when other institutions told us we're doing our centennial exhibition too. Sorry, we're not loaning you anything, which is what we heard from 7 institutions, and the Alice Paul Institute. Thank you to Secretary of State Ytasha Womack, First Lady Tammy Murphy for spearheading this initiative, the New Jersey Women Vote, which is actually a statewide partnership of 70 New Jersey organizations. Finally, I would like to invite you to the exhibition. It's open, as Larry said, on the 3rd floor of the library. We'll be hosting a panel. Please put it in your calendars on March 11th. Even if you don't put it in your calendar, you can visit the Newark Public Library website or our Instagram page, Radical Women New Jersey Vote. On March 11th, we'll be discussing the battle for women's suffrage under the auspices of the New Jersey Historical Society with funding from the Africana Institute, the Newark History Society, and also Rutgers. So please join us for that. We also have some other programming for youth that will be on the website as well. I just, again, want to stress, it was so important, and I remember our initial meetings with George and Beth, and we discussed the African American suffragists. Many folks like Blanche Harris, who's never been written about in the context of suffrage, and Beth helped find information on that, as well as immigrant women and working class women. We're both so proud as researchers, New Jersey women, to bring the stories and the framework of the exhibition starts from a working class women's framework, because it's important that we understand that working class women and the working poor women help to shape and create these communities. And as liberal activists, we can't rely on the same narrative of middle class women always leading. We have people like Blanche Harris in Newark, New Jersey, who had a rooming house, who actually led the Colored Women's Political Union here in Newark. We have other women like Florence Spearing Randolph, who moved here, who some of you might know. We have immigrant women like Melinda Scott, and
she had a hat trimmers union in Newark. She was head of the union, and she was also a suffragette.
Yes, and these are the working class women most exhibitions have not spoken of, and we are so proud to include them. So please visit the Newark Public Library's website and visit our Instagram page. So in closing, I will just simply quote something that a lot of you know Alice Dunbar Nelson. And she was writing about Violet Johnson, who was one of the activists that we profile in the exhibition, who moved from the South to New York, and then eventually moved to Summit as a domestic worker. And as a domestic worker, she helped co-found a church. And then after co-found a church, she helped find a home. She helped to create a home for immigrant and migrant women from the South as a domestic worker, as someone who wasn't even from here. And Alice Dunbar Nelson, in one article, she sings her praises. And I'll just leave you with a comment or something that Nelson said that Violet Johnson would say everywhere. She would say, quote, "Talk. Tell them all about it. Let the word go forth. They need to be told about our work and what we have done." Violet Johnson. Thank you.
I have to present you with you. Okay. Which way do you want to do this?
Cover all the way down.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
Okay, that's very neat. You did wonderful. Wonderful.
Earlier, when we were hearing from the NTW Study Club, we were hearing about generations of people developing strong bonds of relationship that have continued and lasted over 40 years. And that process is continuing to go on. So I'm just really delighted that we've got generations of people represented by this award who have done amazing work, and the daughter of amazing family that has done stellar work in the Ironbound and many other places, so congratulations. But also, I have the privilege of working with Noelle, who, besides being a wonderful historian and a fantastic designer, is also a graduate student in our American Studies program. So, so we are trying, I think, on this campus in a way that is quite important to be nurturing the incredible talent and abilities of the students who are coming our way. The other person who I'd like to kind of acknowledge is going to be presenting and be the kind of moderator for our afternoon session. She is Lauren O'Brien, who is a PhD candidate in American Studies here on this campus. Her research primarily explores the relationship between Black memory, public history, and trauma. She has a BA in Black Studies from UC Santa Barbara, an MA in History from Loyola University in Chicago, and she is in our PhD program here. She's highly attuned to the politics within the preservation of history that have ultimately marginalized Black perspectives within larger narratives about the American past. Lauren has consistently sought out opportunities to interrogate these silences and create public platforms that highlight, document, and share the rich and diverse histories of African Americans, utilizing her historical practice to facilitate critical dialogues today on race, gender, and social equity. Lauren has worked at several museums and cultural institutions, including the Jane Addams Hull House Museum, the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, and the Lower East Side Tent Museum. Lauren, I'm really glad you could join us today.
Thank you, Jack. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so honored to introduce our next speakers. I'm first going to start with Ytasha Womack. And Ytasha is an award-winning author, filmmaker, independent scholar, and dance therapist. She is a leading expert on Afrofuturism, the imagination, and its applications, and frequently lectures on the subject across the world. Ytasha was honored among Design Hub's 40 Under 40 Designers for Social Good and Innovation in 2017, and listed as a filmmaker to watch in the Chicago Tribune. Her book, Afrofuturism, The World of Black Sci-Fi and Fantasy Culture, is the leading primer on the subject and taught in colleges and universities all over. Afrofuturism is also a Locus Awards nonfiction finalist, and Ytasha has created and leads an Afrofuturism dance therapy program for teens and adults, often providing these workshops to high schools, corporations, and museums. Ytasha is director of the Afrofuturist dance film, A Love Letter to the Ancestors from Chicago, which was created in 2017 and was televised on WTTW Chicago and screened at the Afropunk Festival in Brooklyn, Blacks to the Future Festival in Paris, France, the Real Time Film Fest in Nigeria, Afrotopia in Bristol, England, and the Black Harvest Film Festival in Chicago, among others. The film won Best Experimental Film at the Collected Voices Film Fest. We want to acknowledge all of these great accolades. Almost done. Ytasha began her career as a journalist covering arts, entertainment, and business. She is guest editor for the business magazine, NV Magazine, a former editor-at-large for Upscale Magazine, and former columnist for the Chicago Defender. Her work has appeared in Essence, Vibe, The Huffington Post, and many more, and I'm sure much more to come as well. And so today she'll be talking about Afrofuturism as a creative tool for transformation. So I ask you all to help me and please welcoming her to the stage to hear her talk.
Thank you. This is so exciting. I'm so delighted to be here with you all today. You are fantastic and wonderful, and you're wonderful in part because you chose to be here in this time. Such a unique time, such a perfect time for you to lend your creative insights, your experiences. The future is thanking you for all that you are currently doing as you transform this space and transform our world. I would like to just acknowledge our ancestors and thank them for all of the wisdom that they share with us, the whispers in the night, the dreams, the inspirations that we get that help us to move forward. Even when we can't find the written documents, we still can tap into these memories and to these concepts and these notions, and then we keep reading and we find these spaces which help us to understand who we are, recognizing that we are not alone. And we do this also acknowledging and thanking those people in the future for the insights that they provide, for the wisdom that they provide, for the warnings that they may give us that help us to make other sorts of decisions and to shift our consciousness as we transform and grow. And with that, I would just like to ask you all, just for a moment, if you could, just keeping that spirit in mind, if you could just stand up for a second. And I know you're all feeling so fine and fantastic, and you just want to put your hands up over your head and just lean over to the side just a bit. Just a bit. Oh, how awesome does that feel? And let's stretch over. Oh, we so rarely move our obliques, I tell you. It's just not something that we do on a regular basis. If you can just get your legs slightly apart, make sure you're a little grounded, soft knees. African diasporic dancing always has a lot of grounding. But let's just take our shoulders and move one shoulder back. Just kind of softly. You don't have to jerk it or anything. Just kind of soft. Letting your shoulders know you're here. Other side, other shoulder, please. Wonderful. How about both of those shoulders together? Oh, look at that. Letting your shoulders know you're here. All right, let's move them forward. Shoulders forward. Keep those knees soft. Very nice. Nice and soft now. Don't jerk it. And then let's just lift that chest. Can we lift just the chest, just the chest? I'm just lifting my chest just a little bit, knees still soft. Can you move side to side a bit? Just a little bit, that's all you're gonna do. Just a bit, you're gonna lift that chest again. Can you rotate your chest? How about this? It's a little easier if you keep your hands up like this. A little easier. All right, other direction, other direction. Keep those knees soft now. All right, let's just press. Press, just the chest, just the chest, just the chest. All right, hips. We're just moving our hips side to side. Just a little wiggle. You're just saying, hey, hips, we're here. Okay, we're not just gonna pop it just yet. That's not where we're going. That's not the point. Okay, let's just stick one leg out and just rotate the hip. If you get up on the ball of the foot, you're just rotating the hip. Very nice. Somebody's been dancing in the mirror. Okay, other side. Let's rotate here. Fine and fantastic. All right, get those knees nice and soft. We're just gonna move up, lift the pelvis just a bit, and then wiggle, 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 wiggle. All right, press. Okay, do 2 presses. Knees soft. Oh, wow, okay, this is nice. All right, let's take it in. Here we go. Here we go. All right, we'll let them know. And now we're stepping. All right. They see you coming now. And now you're going to face your neighbor and be like, hey. All right, let's take it back. Let's take it back. Let's take it back. Oh, thank you so much. You guys can just a little bit of a warm-up to let our bodies know we're here. Just kind of moving that chest a bit, those hips. And that was just real nice and easy, wasn't it? It was just soft, just bringing you into the moment so that you recognize that you are here and you are alive and you are in this time and you are loved and appreciated. It's so interesting. When people ask me about Afrofuturism, a lot of times they say, well, how did you get into Afrofuturism? And they're always expecting me to kind of mention a book or a moment. And usually when people would ask me that story, I had this origin story, right? And the origin story was that I was on Clark Atlanta University's campus, freshman year, and I was having a conversation with another fellow freshman who was actually from Philadelphia, who was really into these ideas of well, he didn't call it Afrofuturism. He was saying that he really liked quantum physics. And then he's talking about quantum physics, and I'm like, okay, it sounds great. Then he starts talking about like Parliament and Funkadelic and the lyrics. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I know that music too. And he's breaking it down like it has this deeper symbolism, which I never thought about ever up to that point. I'm like, okay. And then he starts talking about hip hop lyrics and remixing and how all of this is integrated. And I'm like, okay, I see where you're going with this. Then he starts talking about how there were these ancient technologies that came out of the continent of Africa, and these aren't being acknowledged. And I'm listening. I mean, I understood the idea of it, but I didn't know the research that he was referring to. And, and then he starts talking about this woman named Octavia Butler, who I had not heard of up to that point. And I'm listening. And at some point I said, okay, what is this that we're talking about? And he said, I don't know. And so I said, okay, well, I grew up in metaphysics and kind of a New Thought philosophical tradition. I said, well, is this metaphysics? And he said, well, yeah, then he started naming some books, and we kind of read some of the same books. It was a fantastic conversation. And usually when I would, in the early days of this conversation, shortly after I wrote the book, that is the story I would tell. And then after the book came out, and a year or two later, I had an opportunity to speak on Clark Atlanta University's campus. And the day before, I'm getting ready for the speech, and I'm starting thinking about what I'm going to say, and I'm looking in the mirror, and I'm thinking about this story because I had told this story several times before. And then I said, wait a minute. What if that wasn't the beginning? I said, what if the beginning is now? What if me standing here in front of this mirror, preparing to give this talk on Afrofuturism, me recalling this question that I asked, what is this? What if that moment began when I gave the speech? And it was really my future self hinting to me that this is a path and a trajectory upon which I may go. And so the question didn't begin in the beginning when I thought I was having this conversation. The question began in what we would call the quote-unquote future, or in that moment, my now. And I became so sort of fascinated by this idea because it didn't just feel like an idea. And I'm a person who writes about time travel all the time in fictitious ways. But there was a certain kind of reality to this of, well, gee, what was the beginning? And what does that mean? And so I share that with you to say that when we think about memory and we think about insights that we're gaining, so much of our Western tradition has told us that we're only supposed to look at our lives in a very specific way around how we can be informed. And there have been conversations that I've been having, even just in the past few days, with the speaker who's coming up later, and with others, that we're not always using the right language to articulate and represent some of the aesthetics or some of the technologies or some of the things we have at hand, because our language, the design through which we're operating, whether it's actual algorithms or it's the shape of our buildings and the clothes that we're wearing, are articulations of a worldview that we are socialized into. And we have cut ourselves off sometimes from even being able to recognize what we're bringing to the table. So when I was thinking about this, among other things, I like dance, and when I was writing about Afrofuturism, I wanted to sort of incorporate ideas in dance just because I grew up and I love dance. And I felt that there was more to it. I studied a lot of different styles, but personally, I always loved just house music dancing, this whole idea of freestyle. And when I was working on a project, And I had this idea of taking these two characters from two different worlds. I'm going to take one, they're from Andromeda, and they're from the future, another person from the past. I'm going to have them go on a date at this Egyptology museum, and they're going to see these performances. I thought that would be a really cool short film to sort of capture some of the ideas in Afrofuturism, and nothing in my attempt to get this to come together was working at all. The only thing that seemed, I couldn't get the person who I wanted to play the Andromeda character to come, and I couldn't get the person from the past, and I had all these dancers who were supposed to be on the stage, because the person who wanted to play the violin wasn't there, and the person who wanted to play a harp. I said, you know what? Forget it. I had just come back from Cuba, and I had been studying salsa down there, and I said, I recognized in that moment in Cuba that dance is a language. Dance can be a technology. I don't speak Spanish very well, but as a person who was comfortable in my own body and a person who knew how to dance and felt open to connecting, I realized that there was more in these dance movements than just sort of moving around. And if you look at the history of salsa and you look at the history of rumba in particular, and you start thinking about the orishas or some of these spiritual movements that were incorporated in a dance that was hidden as a party dance. Because at different points in time, people couldn't always do these movements public, could not do them in a spiritual context. So it became very much a part of the party culture. So you would go to the rumba, and I remember a friend of mine there, when I was taking these lessons, they said, oh, we're going to go to this show. I said, great. And so I'm at the show, and the first person who comes out on stage, and they're like, oh, okay. And, there's people in the audience, they're moving, and there's a person on the stage. And the person on the stage said, oh, that's a legba. You don't know the response dance to that yet, so don't do anything. I was like, what? Oh, okay. It's fine. I'm waiting to move, right? I'm like, oh, this beat's great. They're like, you don't know this one yet, so just stay back. And so then next, it's like, okay, great, a legba. And I knew the guy who was playing the legba. I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Okay, so what's next in the show? And then they had a woman come out in bright yellow, and it's like, oh, this is Yumya. Oh, wait, Ytasha, but you don't know this dance either. So you can't just kind of stay and watch. I'm like, well, can I move like this? No, you can't just move like that. You can't just do anything to this dance. There's a beat, it's rhythm, you gotta wait until you learn to dance. I'm like, all right, well, man, when am I going to get to dance? This is everybody else is dancing. They look like they're having a great time. And then next, out on stage, they have Shango, and the guys were hyped about Shango, and Shango's got the whole, machete going. And I was like, wow, this is wonderful. And the guys were excited, and he was like, you can't dance to this either because you don't know this dance just yet, but you will learn it, and when you learn it, then you can do the call. I'm like, what is this about some dance? I don't know. And because I thought I was coming to see a show. And then I realized, well, wait, there's the audience, and there's people on stage, and everybody is a part of the show. And I get to this point, and then after Shango gets off, and then it's like, okay, now we can all dance. Now everybody's dancing, and they're doing rumba, which, as you know, or you may know, is kind of this grounded movement, and it's like this. That's the less sexy way of doing the dance for the purposes of being here. But in short, so they're there, and I'm like, okay, and so this is the dance. And I'm looking, because I'm thinking about all these styles. Modern dance, you're here, and you're out, and it's big. And even a lot of traditional African dance, it's bigger. You're taking up more space, right? You're out here, you're all, your arms, everything's moving. I'm like, why is everything so contained? Because if I step out here, they're like, oh, that's too wide. I want to do like this. No, stop freestyling. I'm like, what? It's just this, but why are you staying here? And I asked the dancer this. I said, why is everything so contained? He said, because we're electrifying our chakra systems. I said, oh, that explains everything, because you're trying to keep the energy in. If you keep spreading it out, it goes out. But here's a dance that was being preserved in an enslaved culture, and they were pulling on this dance for vitality. And that was in the body. And so sometimes when we get into some of our esoteric traditions and wisdom systems, there's a lot of talk about the mind. There's a lot of talk about our logic and our thinking nature, which I'm a fan of. Many of us are educators, so we understand the value of that. But there's also a knowledge and a wisdom and an intelligence in the body. And I don't want us to lose that as we're moving forward and we're thinking about life. So there is a very sweaty picture of me working with a group of kids in Chicago. For the past couple of summers, I have been doing some work with dance therapy, in part because I was getting all these ideas from some of my travels and some of my own work. What many people don't know, when I was writing the book Afrofuturism, someone had asked me to teach a dance class to some kindergarten kids. And I don't know why I said yes, but I said it. And the magic of working with kindergarten kids is that the best way to keep them entertained is you don't stop moving. So I had to keep coming up with everything. We're doing hip hop, we're doing yoga. Then I'm like, well, can they do salsa at 5? I mean, what all can they do? And I made zero connection between this work that I was doing with kindergarten kids and working on this book, Afrofuturism, until, again, we get to moments like this where I'm working with these teenagers, and you realize that there is a wisdom and a knowledge in the body that we must value and things that we can connect to. And I just started finding it very fascinating. So I created this program that I was doing, and they're learning breathing meditations or breathing exercises, and they're learning how to connect to the silence, and they were doing some kind of warm-up routines where they get to learn a bit about just different movements in different part of the African continent and out of the African diaspora. Some of the moves that you guys did, but a little more vigorous. So they're learning samba and they're learning rumba, and then, they learn Chicago-style stepping, and we do a little bit of modern. We're mixing it up so that they could see the difference and start to articulate a difference in the language. And with that, I said, for this program that we're a part of, they said, well, you have to take them on a field trip. And I said, well, what if we go to the Art Institute in Chicago? That should be fun. And so I'm getting them excited about coming on this trip. And the kids are thinking, well, okay, they want to get dressed up. I mean, they all have to kind of wear the T-shirt. They have so they can put rhinestones on it. They want to have matching lip gloss. I mean, they were getting ready. And I had a class of young ladies, and I think it's important to note that for many of them, this was their first time going to the Art Institute. And so I was prepping them to just really give them understanding of being an archivist or an art collector or working with the museum or volunteering with museums or making donations to museums and the value of preserving art, and really laying it heavy on them before we get there to sort of put them in a space. I didn't realize that in so doing, I'm really elevating the importance of the moment. So they want to look good. And so we get there, and it's downtown, and they're super excited. And we go inside the actual museum, and we're looking around, and because they're doing some yoga, we see different Buddha statues, and we see a lot of ancient Indian statues, and they're like, oh, okay, I do these positions. Okay, I do lotus position. Okay, I see myself. And I wasn't quite expecting that. And then we kept moving along, and they're looking, and they're seeing that there are goddesses in a lot of the art that's depicted. And some of these goddesses are dancing goddesses. And they had done some work where we sort of talked about, hey, if you were a fire goddess, what kind of dance would you do? And they got to break it down. So they're seeing these relationships and kind of like, oh, this is interesting. And then we go into the section where we're looking at indigenous culture and Native American art. And they're looking and they're realizing, okay, there's a lot of ceremonies and a lot of dress that's associated with the ceremony that has dance. And so they're like, oh, okay, this is really fascinating. What I did not realize on this day is that there was not the African American history section the African history section was closed and being remodeled. So they're going from, they're seeing different cultures, and then we get to a point where we're cutting through Rome. And they were having this really fun time, and then we start cutting through Rome and shut down. I mean, when I say shut down, I mean shut down. Like they're looking at me like I had betrayed them in some sort of way. And it was building slow. You know how people are like, oh yeah, and all of a sudden they're like, in one more minute, it's like, what are you doing to me? You've tricked me, you've betrayed me, you're bringing me into this space. And automatically, they felt like this is not a space that is welcoming me. And they're looking at the aesthetic. something about the aesthetic. And I think also the fact that a lot of the imagery, the skin color was actually white. It wasn't a human skin color, it's just white paint. And they're starting to see this certain sort of ideal that it's not connecting, it's not registering, and they felt, like I said, this deep sense of betrayal to the point where I said, okay, come on everybody, hurry up, onto the modern wing. And off to the modern wing we go, and like I said, they're getting frustrated now, and then we turn the corner, and we see this, or this, where we're looking at a film by Colleen Smith, and they're in an enclosed room, it's all black, and the film is one that shows a African-American marching band. And, they're looking, and it's a band that's from the Chicago area, and they were performing in Chinatown, and, many of them were very familiar with Chinatown, and so they're looking, and we watched it maybe for about 10 minutes because it's on a loop, and we step out, and they calm down, and I could tell they're thinking. And then we step into another area where there's a Charles White exhibit. And, initially when they go into the area, they're reading where Charles Wright is from, and it didn't register to them initially that Charles Wright was not their age. They figured he was a peer, because they're looking, oh, okay, he grew up in my neighborhood, no, he went to this school, and then he went there, and they're just kind of moving along, and they're looking at the images, and they're studying them, and they're whispering to each other. And, I'm just trying to make sure the whole event is moving along, right? And so they're looking at these images, and then we take our lovely photo. And when I speak to them later, and we have sort of a wrap-up about this experience, they said to me, that marching band, why were they in the museum? And I said, oh, well, I said, you're familiar with that style of marching band because it's at your high school, you watch the Battle of the Bands, you're familiar with historically black colleges and some of the least that music tradition. I said, but everyone's not able to come to your neighborhood to see those performances. The same way, sometimes you might not be able to go to India when you want to see certain statues, so they put it in a museum because this is a unique artistic contribution. And then they started thinking like, well, wait a minute, so I create artistic works. Am I art? The things that I do can be viewed as art. And so it became really interesting. And so we started talking, and I said, well, what did you think about these moments when we're looking at, the Charles White exhibit? And as I mentioned to you, at first they thought Charles White was a peer. And then they saw he was from their neighborhood, and they said, well, the expressions on the faces, I know these people. They're like, I know these people. I know this relationship. I know what it is he's communicating. I said, okay, well, what else did you think about? And they said, well, we could tell that he really liked his culture, that he loved his culture. I said, well, how could you tell that? I said, well, that's all he painted in the exhibit. I said, all right. And they said they really liked the drawing that he had of Harriet Tubman. And I said, well, think about this. For Charles White, Harriet Tubman was in his past. I said, so what's going on here? I said, here you have an individual who you thought was a peer, who's more like maybe your grandparents' peers, and he's painting something from his past. I said, who is he painting this for? And I'm like, wait a second, okay, he's painting this so that we would see it. Right, so he's painting something from his past so that you will see it today, which is technically his future, because as far as being in a body, he is not here. So what is that saying? I said, we're looking at an interdimensional piece here that's talking in all directions. It's speaking to a past, it's speaking to a future, and yet it's very present. And so we're thinking about this, and then they're saying, and some of the kids, they started saying, well, what do you think it would be? What do you think the world would be like, or who would we be if we lived on another planet? And I said, whoa. is this the direction this is going in? They're like, yeah, because we're on another planet. And then they start talking about world building and what it would look like. And so they kept going. They're like, well, do you guys think we've lived other lives before? And then they keep going into this conversation about what it was. Oh, yeah, well, I think I might have been here. Or, well, maybe this. And so I said, wow, look at this. This whole idea of thinking about dance and contemplating art all of a sudden lent itself to these narratives around interstellar travel or time travel or interdimensionality, or even thinking about living other lives. They're starting to see themselves not just as a person from their respective neighborhood in Chicago. They're not just a person who's here in the United States. They're not just a person who's here on Earth. They are a person in the universe. And their actions and the things that they're doing are interconnected with other people who may value the same thing. They are part of a trajectory. And so this for me was really insightful, because here I am, a person who was really just I love dance, but most people knew me as a writer. And then when I started doing these sort of explorations, even for myself, I was wondering, well, what's the relationship between me being a dancer and me being a writer? Most people would say there's not much of a relationship there, but it is. It's storytelling, but more significantly, it's pattern spotting. Because you're dealing with beats and you're dealing with rhythms and you're trying to find yourself, you're navigating, right? How many different moves can I get in between these beats? You start thinking about clave counts, you start thinking about polyrhythms, you start breaking it all down, and the foundation of it often is a 2-3 or a 3-2 count. It's the same kind of foundation. A lot of African diasporic music falls on these counts. And so you're looking at this and you're like, okay, and you're thinking about all the movements that you can create. And this in and of itself is creating a space. Now you could say it's time travel. Time travel sounds cool. You could say it's an altered space. You can say it's just someone that's kind of in their groove, in their moment. But whatever it is a thing. And it is a thing that has been utilized and preserved and passed down in a lot of our cultures because there's value there. And so this particular piece is a novella I did called Earther 2198, and it's a part of the Rayla Universe series. About this particular story is about a woman who is a neo-astronaut. She's on a planet that's a couple hundred years into the future, and she's trying to teleport to another planet, and they wind up on Earth, and her story is all about trying to get back. And she's part of this larger story, which is Rayla 2212. Rayla is actually a woman who, years later, has to find these missing astronauts who tried to teleport. And they got stuck in space and time, most of them spaces and times that are on Earth. And she has to try to find them to bring them back, to help restore order to the particular planet, because the planet that she's on started off as this utopian space, but then someone sort of took advantage of the chaos and asserted another order that they have to navigate. This is other artwork from the same piece. This particular one was created by Danilo McCallum, and he is, as far as I know, one of the first persons to do a Black Future Month. He did this Black Future Month. It comes out every year, and it's an art show that's actually in Toronto. And this is an image from a love letter to the ancestors from Chicago, because with that project, what I wanted to do was sort of look at the body and how you can bridge the future and the past through dance, thinking about the body as a space that can create those sorts of bridges, and doing so through movement, and sort of situating house music culture in sort of this larger African diasporic relationships or traditions, particularly because this project dealt so much with freestyle movement. Spaceship in Brownsville is a book series that I put out. It was part of a Kickstarter project. I had a residency at Kickstarter, and it follows a woman in 1950s Chicago who is a reporter and works with the Defender. And there's rumors of a spaceship, there's spottings of spaceships, and she starts hanging around these individuals who were really into exploring the paranormal, but also contemplating futures. And I kind of thought about this idea in part because Bronzeville, which was the destination for a lot of people, a lot of people from the Great Migration went to this area called Bronzeville in Chicago, in part because that was the only area they could be in for many, many years if they were coming to Chicago, and they were encouraged to come there because they said, you can live a new future. You can have a life here that you can't have in Mississippi, but you can live that life here, and there was more freedom, and there was an idea that they could have these experiences. And I started thinking, well, gee, did the future of Mississippi go to Chicago? Would Ebony Magazine have been in Mississippi if things and times and traditions have been different? What would be different? And so I started thinking about these sort of time travel moments or these ideas of these other futures. So I'm looking at something that's technically a past as a future, and people making movements to be a part of this future. And many of us here are descendants of the Great Migration or other migrations. And this is someone symbolizing my character, Bonnie. Thought she was very cute. And I'm thinking about this story. And so she's hanging out with these people, and they're all trying to figure out, they're contemplating new worlds and new spaces and thinking about futures and having all these kind of discussions in the basement of a meat packing plant. And you know, they are people who typically wouldn't hang out together, except for they have this interest in paranormal and in the science fiction arenas. And so then I started thinking about my grandparents. This is a very swank photo. They look like this every day. That's the way they dressed every day in the times. And I started thinking about them. And you know, my grandfather, he came to Chicago when he was a little kid. And he came up with his mother and his siblings. And he grew up in Chicago. And when he came of age, he went back to Newton County, Mississippi. Anybody here from Newton County, Mississippi? I know you're here. I know you're here. You have a connection. And that's where he met his wife, my grandmother. And then she went to Chicago. And so I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about this time. And then I'm thinking about somebody else who was in Chicago at this time in the 50s, Sun Ra. And I'm looking at Sun Ra. And Sun Ra is embodying Ra. And Sun Ra, of course, has this mythology that he came from Saturn. And it's a mythology that he very much embraced and celebrated, in part because maybe it explains some of this music that was coming to him, which did not situate comfortably into how others saw him or how he may have seen himself. So then it's, well, I'm an alien. I must be from somewhere else. And then that explains the inspiration, that explains these new sounds that I can't quite categorize. This is a way for me to relate to myself, to understand that I'm really from somewhere else and I have this purpose. Because I can't just be Herman from Alabama. With these sounds, it's not adding up. I have to be from Saturn. It's like, well, what's going to make me feel like I'm from Saturn? Because, like, okay, well, Saturn and the future and thinking about interdimensionality. And then, you know, he's connecting Egypt, which, keep in mind, even today, people don't want to situate ancient Egypt in the context of African and African diasporic culture. So he's claiming Ra, the sun god, and then he's talking about he's from Saturn. So he's bridging these times. And I'm thinking about him, and then I'm thinking about my grandparents. I'm looking at this image, and then I'm looking at him. I'm like, wait, this is the same time, right? And I'm thinking about my grandparents thinking about new futures, and maybe they were taking it interstellar, and I just didn't hear those conversations. But the point is that you had people negotiating, creating, and thinking about futures, and whether for them it was about being an integrationist, or it was about how do you move to the next neighborhood, and how do you build, and how do you sustain a family, and what's happening in the future, how do you prepare for these things? Even if it's what kind of education do you need? What kind of cultural knowledge and sensitivities do you need? You had people working on that end. You had people gravitating towards politics. You had people looking at how you can have economic empowerment. And then there's some people saying, but what if we are interdimensional, and what if we're a person in this large universe? And Sun Ra represented that, and some of the characters in my story represent that. But Sun Ra was not alone. He was not an anomaly. He was part of a culture of people who were contemplating futures and then looking at how they could express themselves and how they could manifest these things that to them better reflected who they were. Because they said, I can't be what's around me. I'm something else, so I have to imagine what that thing is, and I have to imagine it, and then I have to bring it about. And that's what had someone move from a rural area into a city that's a frozen tundra land, because there has to be some sort of way that I can recreate how I see myself, who I think I can be in this space. And so I'm looking at this past as a future. And I'm looking at the fact that I'm a descendant of people who had this sort of vision, and I'm in technically what could be their future. And these things just became really sort of fascinating to me. And of course, Sun Ra believed in telepathy. And so you're probably wondering, okay, well, all of this sounds awesome, Ytasha, but what is Afrofuturism? Afrofuturism is a way of looking at futures or alternate realities, but through a Black cultural lens. And when I say a Black cultural lens, I'm talking about people of the African diaspora and people of the African continent. I'm talking about all of these, and I think it's very important for you to recognize that when I'm talking about Afrofuturism, I'm talking about where all these different lenses, all these voices often meet. Because we're working with some of the same concepts. I mean, you see Afrofuturism, of course you know it in music with Janelle Monáe or some of the technologies of the future. Or you're thinking about someone like a Sun Ra or an Alice Coltrane, and there's a lot of symbolism that you see in jazz, but it's in dance and it's in literature. I like the idea of using the imagination to transform our circumstances, to reimagine ourselves, because it gives us agency to feel like you can transform your present and to transform your future. If you never limit yourself because of others' limited imagination, never limit others because of your own limited imagination. Afrofuturism does not look at time in a linear way. It looks at the future, the past, and the present very much as one, as we articulated. Afrofuturism looks at mysticism as the flip side to technology in a lot of our sciences. It values the divine feminine. And when I say the divine feminine, I'm speaking not just of women or not just as femmes, but I'm also speaking of the feminine aspect of humanity. It values intuition. It values nature. It values this sort of nonlinear thinking. It values the realm of the subconscious as much as it does our thinking nature. This is symbolized by the Ankh, but it's symbolized by many things. And Afrofuturism does acknowledge that race is a technology. And many of us here, we all know that race was very much created. We know this, but when you think about a technology, it helps you to think of someone making something for a purpose, but it's also, whatever that purpose is, it can also be dismantled. To think about someone making race, to think about that several hundred years ago, the idea of being Black or white as we know it didn't quite exist. The power imbalances that we associate with some of these dynamics did not exist. That was created through law and violence and force over many years. And a lot of that has been eradicated. But it's important to remember that it was created and can be dismantled. the impacts of it can be dismantled. And to which you might say, well, wait, if we dismantle things associated with race, how can I be comfortable and proud of who I am and my culture? How do you keep the culture if you dismantle these power imbalances associated with race? How does that memory show up? What does that look like? And here's an image by Kerry James Marshall. And he's articulating keeping the culture, and it looks like he has a family, and they're in another galaxy, and it's a nuclear family. But you see Dogon art, and you see Yoruba art, and you see the kids, and it's like they're looking at a hologram, and they're learning about Earth, where they were from. And now they're somewhere else. I don't know what their identity is, but they at least remember and activate the things that brought them to that space. And you can preserve and celebrate those things and still dismantle the power imbalances associated with race. Afrofuturism is about activating a vision. And you're activating this vision for the future, but you're also activating this vision for a past that is not always articulated in ways that are visible for you. Sometimes you are getting these little clues and these crumb trails. We just heard about the librarians. They're talking about these things. They're like, I know something is there. I am looking for it. And at some point, and I didn't ask them, they had to kind of imagine some sort of context to make all these pieces work together because they knew there were more people working on this issue. It doesn't make any sense. How many of you are writing in your diaries and saving it for future times? So we're using this imagination to try to articulate with the past, and we're using this our imagination to say where we want to go and to envision where we want to move. But we're also using that imagination to create new spaces now in your contemplation of this past and this contemplation of this future. If the future and the past and the present are one, and you are situated through your own focus around those areas, then what are you transforming? You are transforming now. You are transforming who you are now and how you interact with the world. You are transforming a present. So contemplating the future is not something for people who just like the arts. It's not a luxury. It's what we do as human beings when we understand and connect with ourselves. People are excited about Afrofuturism because they're thinking African and they're thinking future, and the first thing subconsciously that may come to them is, I don't associate Africa and future with the same thing. It creates a moment of cognitive dissonance. You're like, and they're like, because it's creating a new space to have a dialogue that you've already been having, but probably haven't acknowledged because of the language or the designs around you are in some ways not helping you to see yourselves, to acknowledge your own thoughts. So Afrofuturism is a lens on how to talk about the future. A lens that is rooted in the cultures and the people of the African continent and the migrants who've come out of those, forced and otherwise, who have built these spaces, and the insights and the wisdom from those spaces can help everyone. It can transform our humanity because there are people creating the quote-unquote future who do not have a context of culture, who may not have a context for some of these things. And just because they don't have a context doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's still here for us to build, here for us to improve and to look at ourselves and to value humanity as we move into the future, as we understand who we are in the past, and as we reconcile and live the lives that we're supposed to do now. Because these contemplations are transforming us every moment, every second, collectively. And our optimism will transform us because our optimism is why many of us are even here. The optimism of people who are in tougher circumstances we are trying to imagine but don't want to imagine, is how some of us are here today. Value who you are. Value the things that make you who you are, and celebrate your relationship to the future, these technologies that you have through the arts, and this wisdom that is available for all of us to recraft a better life today and tomorrow. Thank you so much for being fantastic.
Thank you, Ytasha, for encouraging us to celebrate our relationships with the future. So our next speaker is Dr. Jason King. He is an associate professor, a director of writing, history, and emergent media studies, and director of global studies, as well as the founding faculty member at NYU's Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music. He is a journalist, author, musician, DJ, scholar, consultant, and producer. He is the author of the Michael Jackson Treasures. He has published numerous academic essays in anthologies and journals, and he is a regular contributor to publications like Pitchfork, NPR, Billboard, BuzzFeed, Slate, and Vice. Professor King was the host and co-producer of NPR's Noteworthy, a series on the creative process of music superstars, as well as the curator of NPR's 24/7 streaming R&B radio channel, and the host of the CNN original podcast soundtracks, The B-Sides. He's been a yeah, that's right, yeah. He's been a legal expert witness for artists like Jay-Z, Kanye West, Drake, Katy Perry, Madonna, and Lady Gaga. Wows, right? He is an inaugural member of the Hip Hop Council at the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, and he serves on several prominent advisory and editorial boards. He is the band leader, songwriter, and producer behind international supergroup Company Freak. Today, Professor King will be giving us a lecture entitled A Brief History of Black Musicians Feeling the Future, from Thelonious Monk and Prince to Missy Elliott and Frank Ocean. Please join me in welcoming Dr. King to the stage.
Hello, everyone. I am so glad to see you and to be here with all of you. Thank you for that introduction, which makes me blush, if you can see it. But I'm happy to be introduced that way. I want to thank Salamisha for inviting me here and for putting all of this together. Jack Chen, where's Jack? I don't know where Jack is, but wherever Jack, there he is. Thank you, Jack. Thank you to Jessica, the entire staff. What a great gift to be on a program with such amazing fellow lecturers, Ytasha, Ruha. I'm amazed, and just feel very honored to be part of the MTW lecture series and to be here at the Clement Price Institute at Rutgers. It's exceptional. So the title of this talk today is A Brief History of Black Musicians Feeling the Future, and then there's that subtitle. And I was gonna take you on a tour of Black musicians in futurity, everyone from Billie Holiday to John Coltrane to Nina Simone to Monk to Nina Cherry to Missy Elliott to Prince to Lizzo, and then I was like, not enough time. So I'm just gonna do two musicians. I'm gonna talk about Diana Ross and Prince. Is that okay? Do I have your permission? Okay, good. And if you'll indulge me, I'm gonna just talk a little bit through my forthcoming book. It's been forthcoming for a long time, but it's really coming pretty soon. Called Blue Magic, Spirit and Energy in Black Popular Music. Let me just click here. There we go. All right. Okay, blue magic. Spirit and energy in Black popular music is a dissection of the mechanics of energy and spirit in Black popular music. By that, I mean it's a deep investigation into the metaphysical, energetic, and spiritual elements of Black music. So I'm talking about things like soul. How many people know soul? I hope everyone in the room. Funk, flow, vibe, swing, heat, being anointed in gospel music, ashe, right? The Yoruban principle. So I'm doing this by looking closely at the work of artists like disco belter Lolita Holloway, 90s R&B chanteuse Toni Braxton, who got referenced this morning, hip-hop producer Timbaland, Jay-Z, Roberta Flack. I have an entire chapter on vibration in the work of Roberta Flack. Phenomena like soul and vibe may be non-representational. They might be metaphysical. They're abstract, they're elusive, but they've always been essential and core and to the power of Black music. Whether we're talking about the blues or gospel or jazz or disco, hip-hop, house, go-go, dancehall, Afrobeat, hip life, kwaito, dubstep, crunk, chopped and screwed, trap, tropical house, you name it. Energy and spirit are the through line. We go to a soul music concert because we expect it to be soulful. That's the most obvious statement I could make. But if you didn't experience soul at a soul music concert, you would think something is wrong or something's missing. So soul is central, but how do we define soul? How do we talk about it? How do we characterize it? We expect to experience the transmission of soulful energy, an experience that James Baldwin once called the electrical current of theater, that alchemical process of flesh and blood corroborating flesh and blood, performers and audiences in a holistic feedback loop of intense feeling. I'm interested in Black music's ability to produce good feeling, good vibes. How many people have had good vibes listening to Black music? Okay, all right. All of this, a fancy way for saying, you know, that good convivial feeling you get when Frankie Beverly and Maze's Before I Let You Go comes blasting out of a car speaker. If you can capture what happens when a song like that comes on, that feeling that you get, that's what I'm trying to capture. Black music's vibrational ability to aggregate and bring people together on one soulful accord is what I call getting togetherness. And that term, getting togetherness, I'm actually borrowing from singer-songwriter Les McCann, who wrote Compared to What for Roberta Flack. He talks about that in his liner notes to Roberta Flack's 1969 debut album, First Take. He goes to one of her concerts and he says, there was so much getting togetherness in the room. I feel getting togetherness in this room. It's abstract, it's non-representational. We can't bottle it, or maybe we can, maybe there's a technology we can, but it's there, I feel it. So I want to be able to write about it and to talk about it and for us to all be able to theorize and think about it. In its bent for getting togetherness, Black music offers us a blueprint for the future that suggests how we might achieve wholeness in the social order, not simply through lyrics or themes, but through aesthetics themselves. Aesthetics that prioritize collaboration, collective configurations. Think about the complex structure of Wu-Tang. That's specific to Black music, I think. Ensembles, whether you're talking about Miles or Coltrane or Ornette Coleman's or the boy band Brockhampton today. These are the ways in which Black music suggests a blueprint for coming together and wholeness. Black music's getting togetherness is related to scientific thought on magnetism, synchronicity, and entanglement. In radiational physics, resonance is the word used to describe therapeutic holistic rapport, what's often referred to as a kind of mutual sensing. Black music energetically creates opportunities for improvisational alliances, solidarities and accords, and various forms of kinships and solidarities that are cultivated in the music, sometimes long before they actually manifest in social reality. So the music points a way to how we might come together through these collective configurations and ensembles and improvisational models that exists even if you have legal segregation, right? You might have other kinds of forms of integration in the music. In his book, In the Break, scholar Fred Moten reminds us that black music creates ensembles and improvised social configurations that confirm Marxist and Marxian utopia. And in so doing, they offer us a blueprint of resistance and respite from atomization and fragmentation, abjection, social exclusion, marginalization, and various forms of social and political disenfranchisement. Here, and I mean specifically in this room right now, it especially makes sense to reference the great Newark writer Amiri Baraka. In his book, Black Music, he writes, quote, "If you play James Brown, say, money won't change you, but time will take you out. If you play James Brown in a bank, the total environment is changed." Not only the sardonic comment of the lyrics, but the total emotional placement of the rhythm, instrumentation, and sound. And energy is released in the bank, a summoning of images that take the bank and everybody in it on a trip. That is, they visit another place, a place where black people live. But dig, not only is it a place where black people live, it is a place in the spiritual precincts of its emotional telling where black people move in almost absolute strength and openness, unquote. Absolute strength and openness. For Amiri Baraka, James Brown's funky grooves release an energy. They open up a portal that beams us up, Star Trek style, through time and space travel to a speculative other place where black people move in absolute strength and openness. And I think that notion of absolute strength and openness connects to James Baldwin's idea that black people, we're defined by a kind of ironic tenacity. That's the words he would use. That we've learned to wield a kind of fierce and stylized freedom and power that we have yet to fully possess or realize in our unfree social and political realities. But it's there in the music. When the music hits, it beams you to that place where we have that kind of power and freedom. And that's part of the power of black music. So energy, vibrational energy and spirit and vitality may constitute the core of black music's profound power, but they can't necessarily be measured or accounted for by way of scientific proof. So I call these things not there-ness, right? The fact that so much of what black music's constitutive power exists in an abstract space, I think of that as black music's not there. It's there, but it's not there. So since we don't have a physical language to effectively and consistently account for those non-representational aspects of black popular music, we tend to sweep them under the rug. This is an accounting problem. How do you effectively account for not there-ness in black music? Or, more to the point, how can you not account for abstraction and metaphysics in black popular music? Can you write about Patti LaBelle without talking not just about her musicality, which is profound, but also about her profound command of energy and spirit? Blue Magic proposes that the problem of reading what's not there has already been addressed in the aesthetics of commercialized black popular music styles by way of those energetic, non-representational, not there, elusive phenomena like swing, soul, funk, flow, vibe, ashe, et cetera, focusing on energy and spirit brings black music into an urgent and overdue conversation with science and physics. Black music's centralizing of things that we can't see or touch, and its summoning of energy and opening up of portals emerges as a kind of aesthetic meta-commentary on existence itself, asking some of the same questions that quantum physicists like Brian Greene, who's written Hidden Dimensions, for instance, some of the same questions they've been asking for years and years about hidden dimensions and multiverses and other worlds. It also brings black music into a conversation with bodywork practices, dance studies, movement praxis, alternative therapy, as well as Eastern, African, Caribbean, South and Central American cosmologies, things like yoga and prana energy, feng shui, vastu, and many other systems that deal with the manipulation and flow of energy. We should be having these conversations more often. These tend to be subjects that have long been marginalized in academic scholarship, and especially in cultural studies, because of scholars' deep-seated failure to take seriously vitalism, superstition, a whole host of other alternative spiritual practices. So my book is really about how through that mystical, elusive release of energy that Amiri Baraka discusses, Black music emerges as a knowledge system. It's a way of knowing. Black music is a way of knowing. And that way of knowing privileges immateriality, abstraction, not there-ness. Funk is a way of knowing. It's an epistemology. Soul is an epistemology. Vibe is an epistemology. These are complex ways of understanding and being and moving through the world with that strength and openness that Baraka talked about. The late scholar Randy Martin once called this practice of reading beyond, right, where you're reading soul or funk or things that are not there, he called it overreading. And essentially that's a kind of reading past the external form of a performance to address its life in sensory surplus. I think we can go a step further, though, and connect overreading to clairvoyance, which we could describe as the sensory practice of seeing beyond into the future. And I think we could also talk about clairaudience, which is hearing into the future. That's a word we should use way more often, by the way, clairaudience. The best musicians, Thelonious Monk, Nina Simone, Larry Levan, Timbaland, Melba Liston, Missy Elliott, we could name thousands right now. They can not only hear beyond, hear into the future, they can hear notes that are not yet there. And I think that's a metaphor for how art proffers to us the blueprint for optimistic futures that we can't yet imagine, what scholar Jose Munoz called the not yet here of futurity. The best Black musicians traffic in energetic feeling, emotion, and sentiment. And in that way, they're not just clairvoyant or clairaudient, they're clairsentient. Please add this word to your vocabulary. Clairsentience is the sensory, mystical practice of feeling beyond sentience, feeling beyond, feeling the future. Black musicians feel the future. So I want to rethink Black music as a clairsentient knowledge system, as a paranormal, paraperformative way of knowing the not yet here that is also the not there. That clairsentient practice of feeling into the future, reading what's not there, requires faith. And what is faith but belief in the substance of things hoped for? The evidence of things not seen. To appreciate the surplus not there elements of Black music, aura, vibe, soul, energy, is to appreciate the evidence of things not seen, which is a kind of optimism. Fela Kuti, the great Nigerian Afrobeat leader, once prophesied that music is the weapon of the future. Black music is a weapon of the future because it's instantiation in faith, in elements like soul that can't be seen, but only felt or intuited. Black music is where feeling, abstraction, and immateriality emerge as the highest form of knowledge and experience. As Bob Marley once said, "He who feels it knows it." Okay. I've always wanted to have that slide up here in a big room. Okay, I just think it's fantastic. All right, so I start Blue Magic, the book, with a preamble on the mechanics and the social implications of how Diana Ross energetically works a crowd. To me, there should be tomes on this, but there aren't. It seems wild to state, but there's very, very little academic scholarship on Diana Ross. We were talking about this earlier at lunch. We could probably only name one or two essays, if that, ever written on Diana Ross as a solo artist. And that's shocking, particularly because she's one of the most successful and impactful Black artists of the entire 20th century, and even to the 21st century. I believe that the deeper reasons for her erasure and neglect from scholarship is because she's a Black woman in pop music, let's just say it. Black women in pop music are rarely taken seriously. You have multi-volume tomes on the Beatles and Bob Dylan, but none on Dinah Washington or Mavis Staples or Phyllis Hyman or Janet Jackson or Mariah Carey or Whitney Houston, on and on and on. But I also think it's because a chief source of Diana Ross's power as a musician is her ability to traffic in energy. The argument I want to make is that if you rethink Diana Ross as an artist whose chief power is to cultivate, manage, and format auratic energy, so aura, auratic energy, vibrational energy in a room, for instance, or a concert space. If you think of her as a supremely effective curator of what Baldwin called that shared electrical current between performer and audience, then you can reposition Diana Ross as an avant-garde, ahead of her time innovator in tactility, touch. Diana Ross's work prefigured and shaped our contemporary interest in haptic technologies around touch, where we reach out and touch and tap and swipe on our smartphones and tablet devices in order to pursue closeness and intimacy with those we know or want to know, depending on what app you're using. All right, so let me start here. In the summer of 1983, Diana Ross staged a free concert for more than 150,000 New Yorkers in Central Park's Great Lawn. On that fateful night, however, a massive thunderstorm tore through the city. Andy Warhol, of all people, happened to be in the audience. And in his posthumously released diaries, he reminisces about the event with no shortage of hyperbole. So he says, "I could never really describe the Diana Ross concert in Central Park. The sky darkened, and the rain came, and it was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Just the event of the century. Her hair blowing and soaking wet. And if only they'd had a covering on the place where she was, she could have kept on singing, and the kids would have stayed, and she would have had her concert for TV. But they stopped it in the middle of the storm, and they're going to do it again tomorrow." She was crying, and concert producer Barry Diller was trying to get her to stop, but she said that she'd waited for 20 years to do this. The lightning made it dangerous, I guess. But it was like a dream, like a hallucination, watching this spectacle. It was like the greatest scene from a movie ever. When they do her life story in the movies, you can just see this huge event, and then later she's crying and saying, "Why did this happen to me?" And then drinking and slitting her wrists. But oh, the thunder and lightning looked so great, so beautiful. End quote. So perfect weather does ensue the following night, and Diana Ross restages her concert without a hitch. But Warhol considers that follow-up concert a bummer. He says, it was the day of the second Diana Ross concert because they decided to redo it, and the concert was anticlimactic because it was just regular. So missing for Andy Warhol were all the unexpected elements that made the opening night so dreamlike, cinematic, and beautiful. Swirling wind mischievously dusting up against Diana Ross's orange bodysuit and diaphanous cape-like scarf, and rain falling from the darkened sky, crackling with thunder and vivid bolts of electrical discharge. To me, she reminds me of Storm from the X-Men, like stretching around. I'm like, all right. So in her 1994 autobiography, Diana Ross claims that just minutes prior to the start of that concert, quote, "The energy in Central Park was electrified, sensual, alive with the heartbeats of people. I could feel their beauty and excitement, all 400,000 of them." I think it was less, but that's what she said. Yeah. She recalls feeling connected with the crowd that's gathered to see her. She's enlivened by their collective, energetic presence. At her best, and when the weather happens to be on her side, Diana Ross works it in concerts. How many people have actually seen Diana Ross in a concert? Okay. Or, as hip-hop heads say, she knows how to move the crowd. And she does so by generously drawing on her personal energy, and in this case, cosmic energy, to transcendently lift the spirits of audiences, all in the service of therapeutic, convivial, good feeling. Diana Ross's overflowing gift of expended personal energy is itself a kind of political labor. She deploys vitalistic energy, ashe, life force, chi, you choose the name for it, whatever you will. She deploys that energy to cultivate feelingful connection with her audience. For Diana Ross, and for so many other artists who traffic in soulful, sentimental, good feeling and vibrational contact, their concerts and recordings are opportunities for performers and audiences to experience long-distance feelings for each other, affective, intimate, convivial, quasi-kinship bonds that cut across time and space. The reason we go to concerts is to overcome our sense of long-distance feelings for each other. It's like we want to reach out to each other, but we're bounded by who we are as people, and going to concerts helps us overcome that to some degree, or that's the idea. So Black music cuts across the stark reality of our bounded separate selves to remind us of our inherent interconnectedness. It is no coincidence that a handful of Diana Ross's best-loved songs, her 1971 rethink of the Four Tops' Reach Out, I'll Be There, her 1973 Mahogany Treacle Fest, Touch Me in the Morning, and I say Treacle Fest with great love, 1984's Touch by Touch. These songs are all thematically preoccupied with touch and with interpersonal contact and communion. What if we could recast Diana Ross as a specialist in the power of touch? Her best work promotes soulful, therapeutic healing in service of a democratic solidarity and rapport with her audience. Diana Ross's feel-good anthem, Reach Out and Touch Somebody's Hand, released in 1970 and written by and produced by Valerie Simpson and Nick Ashford, became Diana Ross's inaugural solo single after she left the Supremes. featuring a gorgeous string arrangement by Paul Reiser. The epic ballad rides on post-Altamont therapeutic bromides and an inspirational universalist quasi-gospel message. Reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place if you can. Not dissimilar to Dionne Warwick, Burt Bacharach, and Hal David's What the World Needs Now is Love, which was released a year earlier. Though Reach Out and Touch Somebody's Hand only went to number 20 on the pop charts, Diana Ross has long made the song a permanent staple of her concerts. If you've seen her perform it live, she often encourages her audience members to sing along and lock hands with whoever is sitting next to them. I will not ask you to do that right now. Don't worry. Diana Ross's insistence on touch in these situations is not just theoretical, not just thematic, it's physical, it's experiential. No Diana Ross live concert performance of Reach Out and Touch Somebody's Hand is going to be successful unless she delivers on the song's intrinsic promise to generate interpersonal communion. The song is intended to therapeutically shift the energy in a concert space and bring bounded souls sitting in separate seats or standing in isolation from each other into mutualistic accord. It is a blueprint for how we can overcome our long-distance feelings for each other and move into a choreography of getting togetherness. Diana Ross's career-spanning predilection for therapeutic tactility brings her performances in direct conversation with bodywork practices like music therapy, because music therapy is very much concerned with issues of touch and tactility, as well as a range of alternative healing practices that are also about the healing power of touch. Diana Ross's tactility practice deserves to be in conversation with a robust body of scholarship on tactility and sensuality by philosophers as wide-ranging as Walter Benjamin, Mick Taussig, and Paul Stoller. But we also shouldn't miss the future-oriented dimension of Diana Ross's work, even though she is rarely considered an artist who has or had any relationship to the politics of Black futurity. Contemporary tech companies like Google and Apple currently encourage customers to reach out and haptically touch their screens or to input keypad demands in order to metaphorically reach out and touch friends, families, and loved ones, or prospective dates or sexual partners, again, depending on what app you're using. You touch the oleophobic screen, the makers of the iPhone suggest, and in no time, you too can meet the woman or man of your dreams or sustain your emotional closeness with your grandmother. We sort of take that for granted, right? That we're reaching out all the time through our technology. On one hand, contemporary haptic technologies alienate us from collective forms of mass aggregation. Woodstock, for instance, could never have happened over a smartphone, right? But even as these technologies alienate us from one another, they also deliberately offer us convenient solutions for overcoming those long-distance feelings. So they give us the antidote for the poison of social fragmentation and atomization that they themselves administer. AT&T helped pioneer that very same conflation between haptics and social communion. And they did so by way of their 1970 Reach Out and Touch Someone campaign. It was then Bell Telephone that was heard in the 70s and also in 1980s television and print ads. AT&T then revived that popular and memorable slogan in 2003 for its Reach Out campaign. That slogan, rooted in the idea of haptic engagement as soulful connection, has endured for decades, and it has arguably inspired nearly every other telecommunications and social media-focused tech company, too. Media theorist Marshall McLuhan, a pioneer in teasing out the relationship between tactility and technology, usually gets exclusive credit for devising the Reach Out and Touch Someone slogan. But I've actually uncovered evidence that our contemporary obsession with haptics finds its roots in a much more unlikely place, in the soulful 1970s Black popular music of Diana Ross, Ashford and Simpson, who popularized that concept of reaching out in touch in 1970, a full year before McLuhan did, or before AT&T did the same. So even though the jingle, AT&T's jingle, is not exactly the same as reach out and touch somebody's hand, there's actually graphs that show the use of the phrase reach out and touch, and there are no mainstream uses of that phrase prior to Diana Ross and Ashford and Simpson's use of it. In the book Digital Dharma, A User's Guide to Expanding Consciousness in the Infosphere, a book I know you've all read just recently, but you should, writer Stephen Vedro traces a non-conventional history of the relationship between telephony and the second chakra, the corporeal energy center that radiates the primordial drive for union embedded in our very protons and electrons. This is the connection chakra. Delving into the work of Marshall McLuhan, Vedro deftly rewrites the history of telephone use as an extension of the eternal human longing for connectedness. Phones, he argues, are no more than the techno-material means by which human beings stay connected with each other at the second chakra level. Vedro recounts how women were hired to replace early male switchboard operators, and in so doing, the sound of the female voice became central to the early consumer telephony experience, linking back to what Ruha was saying about Alexa and these voices today. Vedro's insightful writing suggests another way to think about the ongoing centrality of black female soul and R&B vocalizers like Phoebe Snow and Roberta Flack, who were hired to help brand tech companies like AT&T by lending their voices to the jingles that have since shaped our understanding of the purpose of haptic technologies. Rather than focus only on the techno-dystopian idea that our contemporary technologies are disaggregating us, tearing us apart, and making us lonely through filter bubbles, what if spirit and energy, illuminated in the feelingful, touch-focused black music of artists like Diana Ross, actually drives us to develop these technologies like smartphones, that in turn allow us to become more powerfully interconnected across time and space and overcome our long-distance feelings? So what if we ultimately want iPhones or create iPhones so that they can do what Shaka Khan does in her concerts, right? Given her long preoccupation with the connection between touch and soulful communion, we should move beyond the idea that Diana Ross is simply just a luminary pop figure who's been categorically ignored by serious scholars in the academic establishment. Instead, she plays a prefigurative and constitutive role in mainstreaming contemporary ideas about the power and value of touch in our late capitalist era of socially focused telecommunications technologies. Diana Ross is always already part of the black future, but only if we're able to consider the mechanics of her not there, energy-centric artistry. Make sense? Awesome, okay. So as the Diana Ross example demonstrates, I believe we do need to focus more on what I would describe as the black sentimental avant-garde. And that's a term actually by way of Fred Moten, the scholar. We need to pay more attention to the complex politics of love, intimacy, romance, sensuality, sex, those long-distance feelings in black popular culture, and the way that all of these affective issues exist not outside of avant-garde musings about futurity, but inside of them. The challenge in writing about black music's non-representational life and energetic surplus is that so much of the oxygen in the room has been co-opted by post-humanist scholarship and writing and concerns, writers like Kadwo Ishun and others, who allow us to really focus on very, very important aspects of contemporary technology as it relates to black cultural politics. They're focused on issues of cyborg identity and so on. But I feel like they've also, that's also meant that there's decidedly less attention paid to squarely humanist 20th century artists, people like Diana Ross, or Toni Braxton, or the OJs, or Etta James, or Michelle Montano, or Hugh Masekela, or Anita Baker, Minnie Riperton. There's no books on any of these people. There's no scholarship on any of these people in the academy, right? So one of the ways I think that we have to overcome those gaps in our scholarship is to really focus on black music, not only when it's in an explicit relationship to emergent technology or to science fiction, but also when it's relating to what you might call the sentimental avant-garde, right? So I suggest we pursue the future by digging the past, going back to look at these blind-spotted figures hiding in plain sight, figures whose instantiation and energy and vibe is just as much transformed by technology as it has transformed those technologies themselves. We need to reimagine what black futurity looks like so that we are also producing for ourselves a sentimental future, a sensual future, an emotionally intelligent future, a spiritually rich future, an empathetic future, one where black women, LGBT and trans folks, and many others who have traditionally not been invited to the party play a profound and central role. A black future where figures like, Abbey Lincoln, the great jazz icon, a figure who I think embodies what writer and theorist Paul Kurtz called planetary humanism in her work, where someone like Abbey Lincoln becomes legible. A future where academia takes seriously British-Nigerian singer-songwriter Sade, There should be conferences and festivals and anthologies. There should be the Sade Reader. As crazy as that sounds, it shouldn't sound crazy, right? And that would help us investigate the profound multi-decade power of her sensual, vibey work. A future where Marian Anderson and Dinah Washington, Gladys Knight, Earth, Wind & Fire, Al Green, Curtis Mayfield, and others, Luther Vandross, don't have to wait decades to be recognized or appreciated for the work that they've been doing, work that has been pointing the way forward all the time. Okay, so in that spirit, I want to close this part of the lecture with some thoughts on one aspect of the sentimental avant-garde, which I would describe as the Black erotic avant-garde. And who else to call on to talk about this but Prince? Yay. All right, let's applaud for Prince. Come on, let's do it. Yeah. So in July 1984, singer-songwriter, producer Prince, starring in his box office bonanza Purple Rain at the height of his transmedia crossover success, released Erotic City as the B-side of the hit single Let's Go Crazy. The full title, as you see up there from the 45, is Erotic City, Make Love Not War, right? Come Alive, with no punctuation. Prince was way ahead of the millennials, no punctuation on smartphones. An instant electro-funk classic, Erotic City is creepily android-like and flagrantly sexual. It features Sheila E. on co-lead vocals, and it's one of Prince's most danceable and indispensable outliers. Erotic City is what it might sound like if James Brown did a one-off collaboration with George Clinton, Bell Laboratories, a Speak and Spell Machine, and the Johnson Crew. Prince, the record producer, is Apollonian, all puns intended, in his studio choices. Exquisitely minimalist and full of restraint, there's so much spaciousness to Erotic City's nervous, marauding groove. In fact, Erotic City achieves a complex simplicity that's rare in 80s funk. There's no horn section, few suspended keyboards, no live battery of background singers. Prince's hypnotic bass, no more than 3 simple repeating notes, never lands on the tonic, giving the track a slightly off-kilter, unresolved tension. Prince's eccentric Lindrum programming features syncopated polyrhythms and his signature gated reverb and echo, equal parts Kraftwerk and Green Velvet. Erotic City joins Vanity Six's Nasty Girl, also written and produced by Prince, as a signature groove that would later set the stage for the whimsical, computerized funk of producers like the Neptunes, Timbaland, and Missy Elliott in and beyond the late 1980s. Erotic City is permanently ahead of its time. Like the best of black music, its predilection for warped space and time means that the track is on time, in time, out of time, and past time at the same time. Erotic City's lyrics, by the way, this is the only time you'll probably hear somebody lecture about Erotic City in the Academy, but that's why I'm doing it. Erotic City's lyrics match the track's downcast mood, especially when horny-toed Prince has Sheila E. offer up alternate options if they fail to get laid. If we cannot make babies, maybe we can spend some time, he says. With its electro-funky rhythms and otherworldly pitch vocals, Erotic City is the sound of dirty-minded black cyborgs figuring out how to jack each other off. Prince isn't performing the song alone. Sheila E. acts as the track's sexual cut to riff off of Fred Moten, himself riffing off of Nate Mackey. She cuts and augments his song, transforming what would otherwise be a solo Prince jack-off session into a strange relationship. Erotic City presents us with not just one Prince voice, there's multiple Prince voices in harmonizing high and low pitches. There are so many timbres of Prince in Erotic City that the singing turns queer, weird, strange, alien, futuristic. Dean Van Nuyen once noted that Prince, quote, fluttered between the margins of genders and genres as a cyborg chanteur. Erotic City forces us to rehear that famous line from I Would Die For You from 1984, I'm not a woman, I'm not a man, I'm something that you will never understand. If there's no central voice in Erotic City, Prince is mixing his fractured, multiplicitous lead with Sheila's, whose voice is actually pitch consistent. That's because Prince is electing to perform a version of black masculinity that's shifting, changing, and unstable. Prince's production choices around his voice echo the work of Afrofuturist science fiction writer Samuel Delany, who wrote a lot about fractured identities and the search for erotic cities in books like Triton, Stars in My Pocket, and even his nonfiction books like Times Square, Red, Times Square Blue, which is about a history of New York and Times Square as an erotic city. Erotic City, like many of Prince's orphan B-sides, is a homeless, placeless track. Never originally included as part of an official album, Erotic City doesn't seem to belong anywhere. Even the song's offbeat production honors its placelessness. It was recorded in Los Angeles, but it sounds like a confluence of references that include Prince's hometown, Minneapolis, Detroit, because of its referencing of Parliament's Chocolate City from 1975, and Prince actually wrote Erotic City on the night he inducted, or the night he went to go see P-Funk perform, and then he later inducted them into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's also referencing Oakland by way of Sly and the Family Stone, Love City, and it's also referencing Copenhagen, because the track is a kind of mopping of the duo Laid Back from Denmark, who made the strange anti-heroin, pro-cocaine polemic White Horse. So if you know White Horse, it sounds the same as Erotic City. So, all right, so Erotic City dances all over the map, but that dancing is more than just figurative or metaphoric. Erotic City's twitchy rhythm track, how many people did a little twitching? Okay. It's designed to compel you to come alive. Remember the subtitle is Come Alive? It's designed to make you move your body, to turn you into a sexy dancer, a human compass in search of an answer to Norman Whitfield's eternal question, which way is up? And in black music, you get down to get up. Given its impressionistic lyrics and mobilizing music, Erotic City is all about geography, location, direction, and displacement. From the title alone, Erotic City references a place that is no place, because it's an imaginary future utopia that does not exist, but could exist if we could figure out a way, as the lyric suggests, to make it come alive. I've listened to Erotic City for decades, and I always ask, where is it? How do we get there? How many miles? Can I GPS it? Google map it? How do you get to Erotic City? So in this song, Prince is picking up on that late 60s pre-Altamont summer of love ethos, make love not war, by giving it that subtitle, as well as Sly and the Family Stone's bohemian, Kojic-infused love vibe, and he fuses that to his own Protestant Christian theology by way of his Seventh-day Adventism. His goal is to render the possibility of a redemptive erotic city, a hedonistic destination where you F until the dawn, that biblical rapturous end times inflection moment that Prince returns to again and again in his lyrics. So I do think his work in a lot of ways complements William Gibson, Octavia Butler, Samuel Delany. Prince was imagining virtual worlds long before a lot of other musicians were doing so, and those worlds featured fictional erotic cities with purple people living purple lives and little red Corvettes driving down highways and byways and triways. In its unmappable precincts, Erotic City conjures an impossible place that we haven't yet reached, but that the funkiest of us want to move and dance toward, a place that may not currently exist, but feels worth getting to in the future. What if we were to think of Erotic City as more than just a dance track, but as an offbeat funk cartography? It's a map. The song gives us directions on how to get to the other side, get to the B-side, that utopic space or place of alterity, of otherness that doesn't yet exist, that space of absolute strength and openness that Baraka talked about, what Jose Munoz again envisioned as the queer not yet here. What if we all took Prince's exhortation to let's go crazy, so let's actually go crazy, and rehear Erotic City as a taboo-breaking electro-funk contemplation of the politics of distance, geography, time, and urbanity, a vision of funk that's out from the outside, beyond place, committed to outsiderness, because it's black and brown and white and American and European and Hollywood and Laurel Canyon and Bay Area and Minneapolis and New Jersey and Detroit and Danish and Rick James-esque and George Clinton-esque and who knows what else. And I'm coming to the end here. Crafted during the age-shocked Reagan 80s, that same era that has recently been mined and excavated in two of the best works of popular culture this millennium, Jordan Peele's Us and HBO's The Watchmen. Erotic City maps out those underground, subterranean, lost, not yet here future networks of visceral feeling, hot touching, aching horniness, erotic sex, that push back against the grimness of late capitalist, hyper-techno, sterility, pessimism, cynicism, and anerotic dread. Erotic City's sensual, feelingful rhythms are instead designed to create loose joints, to protest against ossification, joint hardening, stiffness, coma, anti-sentience. Ultimately, Erotic City, in making us move, reminds us that the surplus, not there, energetics of Black music are some of our best weapons of the future. Black music is more than a music or sound. It's a destination. It's a place we can summon. It's an erotic city we want to get to through time and space travel. It's a musical, sonic location destination where erotic citizens, hell-bent on dancing in soulful solidarity, converge, get together, move their bodies in sensual togetherness as a way to achieve therapeutic protest. Black music has already mapped out the blueprint of the future for us. We are the ones who now need to make it come alive. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks.
Wow, what a great way to end on get-togetherness. I took that away from that. So I'm gonna pass the mic to Jack Chin. He's gonna have some announcements and a more formal closing, but I just wanna give a round of applause again for our speakers.
Some unnamed corporation somewhere in the cybersphere that's tracking this kind of thing is going to wonder what happened. How come Erotic City suddenly spiked after this event, right? So like, what was that about? They won't know. That's fine. Okay, so thank you. I mean, so many of you are still here, and I understand why, because this was an incredible 3 speakers. Thank you so much. Really fantastic, amazing. Yeah. It was such a special treat to have you 3 together like this. Really, thank you so much. So, there is more. There is more. There will be. So I'm going to give a few thanks, but just to say that there's reception right after this at the New York Museum. We really thank the fantastic new director of the New York Museum for really extending this open invitation to us to be there, and again next year. Next year, seeing into the future, February 20th. Please write that down in your calendars, February 20th. Tell Misha, that's correct, right? Okay, we're going to double check this, but I was just going with my third eye here. So put that down in your calendars. I wanted to really express our appreciation to the people who, the 20th, okay, good, okay. The people who made this event possible. You can tell what a special place it is to be at Rutgers at Newark right now. It's really fantastic. And so we have to thank the Chancellor's Office, Nancy Cantor. We have to thank the Vice Chancellor's Office, Sherry Ann Butterfield. We have to thank the Dean's Office, and we're also really delighted to report that we have a new incoming Dean by the name of Jacqueline Mattis, who is spectacular. So there is this alignment, further aligning. We have to thank Prudential, of course, and you saw Shanae Harris. We have to thank the New Jersey Historical Commission and Sarah Curitan. It may still be here, but so thank you so much, Sarah. And also the New Jersey Council for the Humanities, and of course the New York Museum. And we have so many friends and partners who have been critical in making this day possible. You can't imagine how many months ahead of time this kind of logistics and just the pure organizational complexity that's required in making this happen. But I should first acknowledge, as we have already, Mark Krasovic, who's an associate professor of history and American studies here, Laura Troiano, who's the acting director of the Honors College, and also an assistant professor of practice in the history department, Christina Strausberger, who is the true miracle worker on this campus. Christina, I hope you're still here. And of course, the Paul Robeson Campus Center. Thank you so much. Nora Longo and Shanita Carter and the staff of the Digital Communications and Editorial Content Office. Thank you so much. Mi-Hung Young, who's a PhD candidate here. Sam Hega, who unfortunately we left him off the program, but Sam actually worked on the annotated bibliography. Thank you, Sam. Diane Cuddy, owner of Diane Cuddy Design. Peter Learmont, owner of Porta Print Publishing, which does amazing miracles when things are submitted too late and at the last minute. And the Rutgers University Honors College students and volunteers who have been making this whole event so smooth and so wonderful. They've been at the desk. Please thank them as you're going out. And the staff of the Price Institute. That includes Alexandra Chang, who's the Interim Associate Director, Claudia Sepulveda, who we were able to steal from Rutgers at Camden. So well, I'm so happy, Claudia, you're here. Jessica Hernandez, Maureen Mian, and also our retired administrator, Marissa Peterson, who has been so fantastic. So thank you, all of you, for doing that great work. And finally, but not at the least at all, is really, of course, the 40-year veterans, the 30-year veterans, the 20-year veterans, the 10-year veterans, and all of you who came today and braved the weather to get here. So thank you, audience, for being here and sticking around all day. Thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause.